Good morning. This is Needu, and I welcome Dr. Catherine Gentry. And before we will start and talk about what she is talking, I just want to share a disclaimer that this presentation, we are recording this presentation, and this presentation will go on the Center for Positive Wellbeing and Hope. Welcome, Dr. Gentry. And today, first of all, I really appreciate that you're sharing this very good topic, and it is near to my heart because whenever I started job here, I have a student, and I will share this story later on after this presentation, and whose son was suffering. Teacher told that he has a dyslexia, but actually he didn't have it. So I am so happy that you are here to talk about this. So topic of today's presentation is dyslexia and appropriate classroom accommodation. And I welcome you, and floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deep. It's a pleasure to be here and welcome everybody. I'm a little nervous, but I'm also excited to share what I know about dyslexia. The topic of my presentation is, of course, dyslexia and appropriate classroom accommodations. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, first of all, what dyslexia is, as well as some misconceptions that people may have about dyslexia, which I used to be guilty of myself, as well as some signs of dyslexia, and of course, the appropriate accommodations to help meet the needs of those students, whether they are young children, teenagers, or adults. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Catherine Gentry. I am a new assistant professor of education here at the School of Ed. I'm also the freshman advisor for the School of Ed, and thank you for coming.
Hey, welcome.
So, of course, the topic is dyslexia and appropriate classroom accommodations.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself too.
Absolutely, and I was just getting to that. Thank you so much. I have a doctorate of education in curriculum and instruction, which I earned from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, or ULM, as a lot of people know it. I'm currently the assistant professor of education and freshman advisor at the School of Education. And I have a variety of interests. I'm just thirsty for learning 24/7. Growing up, I always asked the question, why, because I just always wanted to know more and more about a variety of topics. But within education itself, I love learning about curriculum development. I love learning about why certain curriculums are formulated in a variety of different ways in order to meet the needs of students. I love learning about instructional design to not only help make students successful, but to keep them engaged so that they can be successful. Special education is a topic near and dear to my heart as well. The last 3 years that I worked at a Title I school were spent in a special education classroom. And those students just had my heart 24/7. And I actually got to experience firsthand some students who actually had dyslexia. So this topic's relevant to me as well. Diversity and inclusion is another topic of interest because the world is becoming more and more diverse every second, every minute, every hour. And it's important to know how to welcome those students within your classrooms so that they're able to feel at home and to perform successfully academically and on a socio-emotional level. Differentiated instruction also is near and dear to my heart as well, because not every learner learns the exact same way. You have to learn how to gear toward those visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners to make learning not only more engaging to them, but more relevant to them. And I also just love digital and online technology. It's a great way to keep students engaged in the classroom. Some of my favorites that I love to use in the classroom are Quizzes, Kahoot, and I stole one from Jesse on Nearpod, A Time to Climb. My students in 3140 just love that. So before we go, into signs of dyslexia, misconceptions of dyslexia, as well as appropriate accommodations, we first have to know what dyslexia is. Dyslexia is a learning disorder that can impact a person's ability to read words fluently and spell words correctly. You may ask, well, what does that look like? It can look like a variety of things. Letters can look backwards or upside down. For example, people with dyslexia might have their G's and Q's backwards. Text could look like it's jumping around on one page. Letters can look similar in shape, such as your O's and your E's. Letters could look jumbled up or out of order or distorted. If you notice the image on this particular slide, you can see that the text is very blurry and distorted. Letters of some words might look backwards to the individual. For example, the word bird might look like drib, or the word dab might look like bad. And students may be able to successfully read the words that are on the page, but maybe not remember exactly what they read in their entirety. And that would cause them to go back and to reread certain words or certain passages that they may have on the screen or on a handout or a worksheet or whatever they might have. The learning disorder affects parts of the brain that process language, but it does not affect intelligence. And I just wanted to reiterate that. People who have dyslexia are not below level intelligence. What happens is when a dyslexic person sees letters or words reversed and mixed up, there's usually nothing wrong with their vision with their eyes. What usually happens is the mind interprets what they think the eyes are seeing, and that can impact a lot pertaining to their difficulty in reading, their difficulty in spelling, and so on. There is no known cure for dyslexia. However, it can be successfully managed through proper interventions and strategies, and the causes are typically unknown. And that's why this topic fascinates me so much, because I'm interested to delve a little bit deeper and find out on a scientific level just exactly what is specifically causing dyslexia. So these are some misconceptions of dyslexia that I had growing up and as I got older, and even as a classroom teacher before I became a special education teacher. And I've learned a lot since then. But some of the misconceptions are that dyslexia can go away on its own. It doesn't go away on its own. However, it can be successfully managed through proper interventions, which we will get to later in this presentation. The earlier dyslexia is addressed, diagnosed, the sooner students can experience the academic success, as well as experience an increase in their self-esteem, because they're able to perform on a much higher level within the classroom because those issues were addressed. Dyslexia is a sign of below-level intelligence. Absolutely not. People with dyslexia are very intelligent. They just struggle to find the right words to express themselves. They often know the answers to questions within classroom discussions or within questions on a worksheet or an exam, but they need time to retrieve those responses or those answers from their working memory. Their working memory is a little bit weaker, so they need that extended time to help them retrieve the knowledge that they need in order to be successful. Another misconception is dyslexia can cause vision problems. This is absolutely not true at all. Dyslexia affects part of the brain that processes language. It's not an eye disorder. In fact, most with a disability actually have normal vision. I cannot say that for myself because I am very nearsighted. If I take my glasses off, I will walk into a wall. And finally, if adults and children read letters and words out of order, they have dyslexia. This is not necessarily the case because as students begin to learn how to read and write, they may misspell words, they may mix their B's and D's up, and it's just a completely normal phase as they begin learning to read and write. Just because you see those signs early does not mean they have dyslexia. However, it's important to keep an eye out and watch their progress so that if that is the case further on, it can be addressed early and they have the potential to be successful. So let's look at some signs of dyslexia. Let's look at some signs within children specifically. Some of the signs that children may have is illegible handwriting, difficulty recognizing letters. If you look here, for example, they may have their A's looking like B's when you see the word teapot. They may have their E's backwards. Their P's may look like Q's if they write the word teapot, leading to their difficulty in writing. Misusing words. So for example, if they look at a particular word, they may add letters to words or subtract letters from words. So for example, if they see the word ripe, like a ripe apple, they may take the E away, they may subtract a letter from that word, and they may see the word rip instead. And again, it's not because of their vision, it's because of how the language processes are affected within their brain. So their brain is essentially telling their eyes that this is what I see. They could have difficulty remembering or learning words. Going back to that working memory that I brought up just a short time ago, people with dyslexia, and I'm trying to use that person first language here instead of dyslexic people, but people with dyslexia have a weaker working memory. So they have less capacity for holding information, which can impact how they make connections and solve problems within the classroom. And that leads into their difficulty remembering. They can also struggle following instructions. And I want to stop and point this out specifically because just because they struggle to follow instructions does not mean that people with dyslexia are not listening to you or being disrespectful. It's just that they need that intervention. They need that little bit of help. They have weaker auditory skills. They can understand what you're saying. They understand the language just fine, but their weaker working memory affects their ability to follow those verbal or written instructions. So they have to have the ability the capacity to slow down so that that information can be processed and they can fulfill the task that you are asking of them. And if I am talking too fast, guys, please tell me to stop. I get excited when I start talking. So if you don't understand something or want me to stop, just say, hey, Dr. Gentry, stop.
It is a very good topic.
There are some other signs of dyslexia pertaining to teens and adults, and these can overlap, but I was just looking for some of the commonalities resulting from teens and adults and from kids in general. But some signs of dyslexia we might see with teens and adults are a slow reading rate or a difficulty reading at a consistent pace. And again, this is not because they're below level intelligence. This is simply because their working memory is taxed. So it takes them a minute to pick up on the words that are on the page or on the screen so that the information can be processed successfully. They may have difficulty spelling words. They can confuse letters that sound alike. They can mix up the orders of letters. So, for example, if the word left is on the screen or on a page, they may see the word felt instead. So the letters kind of get jumbled, going back to that previous slide about what is dyslexia. They can also struggle with taking notes, and this is because it requires concentration and processing of information to take notes. And when that working memory is taxed and it needs that extra time, extra moment to catch up, it can be a struggle to take notes. It can also be difficult to learn another language. And that is simply because when you have letters introduced within language that you would normally see within the English language, like within Spanish, you have your A's and your E's, just like you do in the English language. But when you start learning Spanish, for example, those letters can have different sounds. So it becomes a process for the student, the individual, to recognize certain sounds and associate letters with those given sounds. Another difficulty is they struggle to meet deadlines and staying organized. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not because they're lazy. This is not because they don't want to do the work. It's simply because of their working memory. It affects the way the information is processed, stored, retrieved, and the speed in which the information is processed, again, is slowed down because that working memory is taxed. And the working memory needs time to catch up so that the information can be processed successfully. And we're going to get into some ways on proper accommodations to help students meet those deadlines that they have as well. So here are some appropriate classroom accommodations for dyslexia. These are by no means all the appropriate accommodations. These are just some that I have incorporated personally within my own special education classroom when I worked at a Title I school for the past 10 years. And some of them are as follows: providing small group or one-on-one instruction. By providing the small group and one-on-one instruction, there are fewer distractions. The student individual is able to concentrate more, and that working memory is able to process the information a little bit more accurately. Providing handouts with larger font in order to prevent words from looking jumbled or distorted. What teachers can do is to ensure that larger fonts are provided on any handouts that they may have to improve the readability for the student individual. It's also a good idea to permit scribes during assignments or assessments. That speech to text dynamic. So if students are embarrassed about how they are writing because of their dyslexia, they could have a scribe write their ideas or record their ideas down so that their ideas are still expressed, because it's important for every voice to be heard within the classroom. It's also important to break assignments and projects into chunks, and I do this as well on a daily basis. It reduces demands upon the working memory, and it makes assignments more achievable. I wouldn't have to say not just for students with dyslexia, but for all kinds of students. It's also important to give extended time for tasks. This allows ample time for the students individuals to process the information that they need successfully to complete their tasks. It's also important to provide written reminders about deadlines, because students with dyslexia may struggle with staying organized. It's also pertinent to preview new vocabulary. Instead of just throwing new vocabulary at the students in general, it's a good idea to maybe chunk the information, going back to one of my previous accommodations, where you introduce maybe 2 or 3 new vocabulary words at a time, provide illustrations linked to those vocabulary words so that the students can see exactly what the words mean. And since they don't have 20 vocabulary words that they're looking at, the information is easier for them to process with that working memory that they have. Text to speech is another given. If they struggle with reading, this helps them significantly to get their words out. And they're also able to hear their text as they proofread their work, which is another awesome tool that helps them to be successful. It's also important to shorten assignments. Again, that working memory is taxed, so it's very important that the assignments are shortened so that information can be processed easier. They have that time that they need to take each chunk of information at a time. It's also good to give concise directions and repeat them as needed. And another big thing is to give no point deductions for incorrect spelling or sloppy writing to a certain extent. And the reason for that is that when you give point deductions for incorrect spelling, for example, it doesn't necessarily teach the student, the child, why the errors are incorrect. And as a student myself and someone who is just an avid learner, it goes back to my why question. So accuracy is not always attainable as well, especially if a student doesn't have access to a grammar or a spell checker. So sometimes they may not be able to check their work, check their spelling, check their grammar. It's important to go and get assistive technology, such as grammar and spell checkers, so that the rate of incorrect spelling and sloppy handwriting, for example, goes down, so that students have those tools that they need to be successful. It's also important to give short breaks, as this alleviates the stress that students may have, and it reduces those feelings of being overwhelmed. It's also a good idea to supply copies of notes, as students with dyslexia may struggle with their handwriting. So if they have a copy of notes that were brought up in class, they're able to study, they're able to be more successful. And finally, it's also important to allow tape recording as needed. Students with dyslexia may have weaker listening skills because their working memory, again, is just so taxed. So having the opportunity to go back and listen to a recording is able to provide them with the information that they need in order to be successful. So there are actually famous people out there who have dyslexia. And I thought this was pretty cool. And I'm going to get into one of my little life stories in just a second, so bear with me. So I like this. I mean, there's a variety of people with dyslexia here who we should pretty much know. One of my favorites is Walt Disney. My office looks like Walt Disney just threw up in it. So, yes. But famous people with dyslexia, Walt Disney being one, Albert Einstein, John F. Kennedy, Bill Gates, Whoopi Goldberg, Cher, Steven Spielberg, Anderson Cooper, Orlando Bloom, Oprah Winfrey, Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison. All of these people are famous for something. They may be an author, an inventor, a former president, founder of Disneyland, actors, actresses, and so on. And this is just inspiring to me because it just shows me that there are people out there who have a disability, who went out and they overcame their struggles. Do they still struggle with it daily? Probably so. But they overcame a lot of their struggles and they became successes in their own right. And I just find that very admirable, and it just puts a smile to my face. And one personal story that I'm going to bring up has nothing to do with dyslexia, but is similar to it. Growing up, I actually had a stuttering issue. I would constantly stutter and stutter. And I would always get picked on and made fun of in school. People would perceive me as dumb, below level intelligence. And that was simply not the case. And I can identify with this in a way. Because when I was struggling with my stuttering, I would take the time and look up people who had this problem, because I was thinking to myself, well, I'm not the only one out there with this disability. And I researched, when I was growing up, and I found that there were people just like me out there, like James Earl Jones, Marilyn Monroe. I think one of the royal kings in England had this same disability. Nicole Kidman, Samuel L. Jackson. So my stuttering disability kind of ties in here because I was also able to see, there are people out there who overcame. They had this adversity, they overcame it, and they were able to become success stories in their own right. And I'm happy to say that I feel like I'm a success story as well, because I also use presentations such as this to help me overcome my stuttering issue. And I'm just excited to have the opportunity today. So again, thank you. And to conclude, I have a quote about dyslexia from Princess Beatrice in England, who actually has dyslexia. And her quote is, "Dyslexia is not a pigeonhole to say you can't do anything. It is an opportunity and a possibility to learn differently. You have magical brains, they just process differently. Don't feel like you should be held back by it." So essentially, in a nutshell, she is saying that, people with dyslexia can be successful, just like anybody else out there in the world today. That their brains just process things differently, and that's totally okay, because we have the tools, strategies, and interventions necessary to help people with this disability succeed. And I'm just so excited that I'm part of a university that promotes this diversity and inclusion so that students, such as those with dyslexia, can be successful within their own right. And that is it. Those are my references. If you have any questions about this topic, guys, please send an email to positivity@nsula.edu. Please add Dr. Gentry, NSULA in the subject line, please, so Ms. Deep can figure out if those emails were about this specific presentation. Also, the website for nsula.edu/positivity should be on your screen should you wish to go and visit it. And Ms. Deep, did you want to quote this?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Gentry. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And this was very fulfilling when you were talking about everything and you were talking about famous people. And I think
Yes.
that's the reason we opened this center for positivity, well-being, and hope, because when people see that other people are achieving high, people see that they are handling stress, they are reaching to the highest level, so they get motivated to accomplish a lot too. So I want to share a story about dyslexia. It is about 19 years back, and I was teaching testing environment class, and we were talking about dyslexia. And one of my students had kid who she told that she was really sad whenever I was talking. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Our teacher just told our son has dyslexia." But and so she was devastated. First of all, parents, when they listen that their child has some kind of a disability, they go down rather than. So I really recommend everybody make sure to get awareness about him. So we discussed about, I said, what kind of problem he is facing. So he said he can read one page, but second page when he reads, he basically jumble up all the word, and teacher are getting little bit frustrated. But again, I am talking about 19, 20 year back, because, and then she said, I said, okay, let me ask you a couple questions. I asked her, I said, did you ever give them one word at a time? Said he can read it fine. I said, you are saying that he's reading one page right, one page wrong. So can you tell me that he is ever exposed to language Urdu where we read left to right, right? And they said no. So I said, how about you go home and ask, put a finger on a word and then ask your child to repeat that word. So I just want to, was very interesting. I never heard about that. So for example, when we are reading books, first page is always from our right to left, right?
Yes.
We read it like that. Like first page is always, whenever you open a book, always we start reading, no page start from this side, right? So the child was reading this page fine. When he was turning, he was reading this page wrong. So I told her to go home and put hand on each word and ask that word. But he was doing it and he started reading fine. So what he was thinking that always we start from crease and go in this way. So he was starting from crease of the book and reading this page like this.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just a shocking for me, like, okay, how simple thing, how children interpret stuff sometimes can lead to, so, and teachers struggle. They were struggling for 4 or 5 months that, okay, he's reading one page right, one page wrong. So as soon as his mom started putting hand, he said, why you are putting hand? You should be, said, no, every time you start from the right to left. And the child told that he was thinking that every time he has to start from the crease. So that's why. And I got a very good compliment. And he said to his mom that my mom teacher fixed me. And he was, and it was a really, for me, we have to go in students' head sometime to understand what they are facing. And some of the disability that we are labeling it, sometimes it is just giving them time.
Exactly.
Also, I believe that awareness is the key for empowerment. If we can bring awareness to people and we are empowering them, and actually they are understanding. And I am not talking about just about this uh, problem with dyslexia.
Right.
The same thing with the ADHD, same thing with the all the mental health issue, that we are creating a stigma. Rather than stigma, if we can start providing awareness, so we can empower people to understand these problems, so they can help themselves and we can help them as a teacher too. So that is my quote: awareness is the key for empowerment. Thank you so much, Dr. Gentry,
You're very welcome.
sharing this beautiful presentation. And please, anybody who has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. And if you are here in for the class and getting credit, please write your teacher name, your course number, and your name. Right now, if you have any question, you can even switch on your mic and ask. Anybody has question? Dr. Gentry, I have two questions from you.
Okay.
Okay. So first question is about, you talk about that you are very interested in online education too, digital. So let's think about it, how we can help student with dyslexia using the digital platform.
hmm I would have to say that there's different mediums that you could use for that. I know with quizzes and with Kahoot, for example, that if you project the questions on the screen within the classroom, within the front of the classroom, and have them sit in front of the classroom, for example, they may have an easier time interpreting the text. I know also there are some extensions on Google that work to help students not just with dyslexia, but other disabilities as well to interpret and read text more successfully. Like I know that you can make the font bigger. I think you can even change the font using Google extensions. You have the text to speech where it can read it to you, and as it's being read, the words highlight and light up so the students are able to make connections to the sounds as well as the words. I mean, the possibilities are just so endless. I could be here all day, Miss Deep.
And, thank you so much. That was very good. And I am seeing that, let me read it. Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. And Dr. Gentry, this was an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank
People
you.
are for your presentation. Last question I have it. And Ms. Randy, if you want to add something in that too, you're most welcome. And for example, as a teacher in university, right, we have sometimes 100 students in our class. And
Mhm.
of course, Ms. Washington is doing a very good job providing us the letter that what problem they are facing it. So sometimes how we should handle when we have a like 100 student in the class and we have one person with dyslexia, other with ADHD, other need extra time. That extra time we can give it to them.
Right.
I think that when they are in class, right, with the 100 student, how we can help them personally without disclosing that they have some kind of disability with the other students.
Right, because I mean, that should be confidential, just like with any other disability. within special education. I would have to say with 100-something students, that would be a little more difficult. However, it is not unattainable. Obviously, you don't address things like that in front of the classroom. It'll just shoot a student's self-esteem down to level 0. But one thing that I would recommend doing would be to keep an eye just on how they're taking notes in class. That way you kind of have a formative assessment, so to speak, of how they're able to interpret the information. Another thing that I would recommend would be any assignments that they submit. Obviously, they're going to submit them in Moodle, and no other student is going to see their assignments. Just to kind of keep track of any patterns that you might see. If they're, mixing letters up within particular words, for example, if you notice it may be happening once or twice, maybe it's just a fluke. But if you're starting to see like a pattern of that going on, it's important to take note and keep track of it. And I would say after having adequate amount of data, I would say within a couple of weeks or so, because you need to have enough to kind of make not a definitive conclusion, but a tentative one. Okay, maybe this student needs a little bit more extra help. And I would individually meet with the student. I would prefer to meet with them in person versus email or WebEx personally, because I want to be able to build that connection with the student, form that relationship with the student, because that needs to come first before you address any disability issues that they may have. And once they have that trust in you, then you can go from there and you can get them the help, the accommodations that they need.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very good, very good. And anybody else have question? You're most welcome. You can switch on your mic and share. I do not have any question, but this was a great presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you. They are saying thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. I enjoyed it.
And if you can go to the next slide, and I just want to say thank you so much for giving your time to us and presenting and sharing your time and wisdom with us. And definitely we will have more presentation like this. And any question that you have it from us.
I don't have any specific questions, but if I ever do, I will email or get in touch with you. I just appreciate the opportunity so much. Thank you.
Sure, sure. And if you have any feedback and any comment, please make sure to email me positivity@nsula.edu. And if you want to post it or even email me personally, deep@nsula.edu. Next slide, please. And thank you so much for taking care of this and presenting it. Last slide say thank you so much. There is one more slide.
Oh, there sure is. Sorry about that.
So much. Truly appreciate that. And please advertise this site so more people can understand and more people can see. There are a lot of information on this website. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great day, everybody.
And actually have a good week. Bye-bye.